When we talk about the best episode of a TV show, when we talk about the most memorable moment of a show or sitcom, it is usually a pretty big deal. An episode that mostly everyone can always clearly recognize as the number one episode because of how big it seemed immediately while watching. The Office had Stress Relief, which immediately from its cold open gave you the realization of how amazing this is gonna be. Breaking Bad had Ozymandias, which is in some ways the real finale of the show. But today I will be talking about the show BoJack Horseman, and what, in my opinion, is the most memorable episode of it. The one I'll never forget, and I'm sure a lot of you will agree with me on this one. But yeah, the episode I'm talking about is not The View from Halfway Down. This episode is what a lot of people consider the best of the show. It's the episode where everything climaxes and we get wrapped up, It's the big one. But there is another gem if you go a little down the line back to season 5. Midway through that season, we had a completely unexpected episode. Something that we really didn't think would come out of nowhere. I at least thought something would happen before we would get to this. By that, I mean the death of BoJack's mom. The person he was on the back and forth with, in his head, and a little in real life throughout the previous season suddenly dies. And this was the culmination of that. The funeral, simply put. Season 5, Episode 6, titled Free Churro. Free Churro is just about the second highest rated episode in BoJack Horseman, but in my opinion it should definitely be number 1. It's one of the more unusual TV episodes you could find because, other than the cold open, the whole episode centers on one frame, one guy, one location, one mic, and a whole lot of talking. Yes, in the episode, BoJack is supposed to be giving the eulogy during his mother's funeral, and he could not be doing a worse job at it.
The line of people forming behind me who are all giving me these real judgy looks because I made the Jack in the Box girl cry. And she's bawling and she's saying, I'm sorry, I'm so sorry. And I'm like, it's fine, it's fine. It's not fine, but it's fine.
The episode opens with a dark scene in which BoJack's dad is late to picking him up, and goes on to blame BoJack and his mom for making him pick up the kid, and because of that, he can't continue writing. The scene is 3 minutes long, and just like the rest of the episode, it's all monologue. Just BoJack's father complaining while driving for 3 minutes straight, barely making any eye contact. BoJack doesn't even respond with a single word. And you might say, hey man, that's a little boring, don't you think? Well, that's where I introduce you, my friend, to a little thing in TV called good writing, because this shit is almost flawless. The whole thing just flows through you, and before you can realize that, oh, this shit is taking too long, the scene ends and we finally get into the real meat of this beautiful episode. Now, just like the scene that came before it, the whole episode is a monologue by BoJack, talking about his mom. 22 full minutes.
BoJack.
No show should have that much talking. TV is a visual medium.
You might be slightly wrong on that one, BoJack.
Like if I'm not having an awesome day, suddenly I'm the negative one. Usually when people ask how I'm doing, the real answer is I'm doing shitty. But I can't say I'm doing shitty because I don't even have a good reason to be doing shitty. So if I say I'm doing shitty, then they say, why? What's wrong? And I have to be like, I don't know, all of it. So instead, when people ask how I'm doing, I usually say, I am doing so great.
There almost isn't a more relatable BoJack Horseman moment than this one right here. The great thing about this episode is, yes, BoJack is giving a eulogy about his mom in front of an audience, but throughout the whole thing, it's almost like he's talking to himself. He's never really addressing the crowd, always just going through his own thoughts. It's like his mind was speaking out loud. His monologue starts with BoJack talking about how he got to the funeral and the fact that he got a free churro because his mom died. The first part of the episode is him going through his own type of grief, using comedy as a defense mechanism to cope with the situation at hand. Every time he tries to get serious, he reverts back to a joke, so he doesn't get emotional.
I kept waiting for that, the proof that even though my mother was a hard woman, deep down, She loved me and cared about me and wanted me to know that I made her life a little bit brighter. Even now, I find myself waiting. Hey, Mom, knock once if you love me and care about me and want me to know that I made your life a little bit brighter.
The silence and coughing of the crowd every time he tells a joke conveys how uncomfortable Bojack is up there. The second part of his monologue dives immediately into the events surrounding the circumstances of his mother's death and the final words she had to say to Bojack.
This one instant of strange calm where she looked in my direction and said, I see you. It's the last thing she said to me. I see you. Not a statement of judgment or disappointment, just acceptance.
I see you. Bojack spends the whole rest of the episode going back and forth on that topic, arguing with himself about the meaning of the words she said to him. The interesting thing about it, his interpretation of her words slowly dives from good to bad to worse. It's this theme of being seen and seeking that validation is what gave this episode structure. What made it feel a lot less like some dude rambling about random shit that's not important. Every time Bojack starts to go off the rails with his topics, he goes back to that moment right before her death. His first interpretation of her words is an important, I see you, as if his mother was finally giving him the validation he seeks after all this time. It's the most beautiful of interpretations. It's the thing that Bojack Horseman, as a character, was always seeking in his life. But just as he is that way, Bojack Horseman is arguably one of the most self-destructive characters ever seen in television. And without anyone's help, he goes back to argue with himself about what happened, getting angry at the fact that his mother waited until her final breathing moments to give him what he wanted. So then he finds another interpretation of her words, this time being a lot meaner.
Maybe it was an I see you like, I see you. Like, you might have the rest of the world fooled, but I know exactly who you are. That's more my mom's speed.
But still, that one had meaning. Even if it was an evil and disgusting meaning, it still had some sort of weight to it. Because after that, he starts thinking of it in the most literal way. The I see you. Literally, without any subtext or meaning behind it. It is that self-destructive behavior that always caused Bojack to go down the dark paths he did. And it was no different during this episode. His slow descent into breaking down at the passing of his mom despite the fact that he hated her. He goes back to argue with himself some more and comes back with the new conclusion that she might have not seen him anyway. Bojack goes on to talk about his father for a few minutes and later about his mother and father together. He mentions the first time he ever performed and the big parties his mom used to have, mentioning the fact that in a way, him and his parents understood each other, that they were all drowning together, and thinking that that's what she meant when she said, I see you, that she sees him down there with her. Bojack then goes back to talk about some more and more bullshit, including his old show and stuff, but then finally reverting back to his mom, arguing with himself about how he was doing the opposite of what his mom would have wanted him to do at her funeral, and then finally blaming himself for not even doing the one thing she wanted for her death.
My mom would hate it if she knew that I spent so much time at her funeral talking about my old TV show. Or maybe she'd think it was funny that her idiot son couldn't even do this right. Who knows? She left no instructions for what she wanted me to say. All I know is she wanted an open casket, and her idiot son couldn't even do that right.
Finally, slowly breaking down about how his mom was so difficult and he never knew how to please her. And whilst talking, the final blow.
Moment in the ICU when she looked at me and, I see you. I see you. Jesus Christ.
The realization that the thing he so desperately craved all his life, he never got. His mom was just reading a sign, and it didn't mean shit. That's when he almost fully breaks down about his free churro. The realization that the long-awaited death that you thought would finally do something, change something, all you get is a free churro. The realization that he could never and will never get anything more from his parents. understanding and accepting that he was always alone and will always remain that way. That's the breaking point. That's our cue to cry. And that's when he finally decides to let his mother have her last wish, to be seen. There are a lot of different ways to interpret this masterpiece of an episode of BoJack Horseman. This is mine. The way they ended with him realizing that he was at the wrong funeral parlor at the end just proves that BoJack was never even addressing the crowd at all. He was just talking to himself. He didn't even notice the people in front of him. The whole episode is about his mother, and they never even show her. Not even at the end. Not even during the flashback. Not even the title of the episode mentioned her. A free churro was more important to BoJack than his own mother. He didn't want to give her an open casket, allegedly because she looked horrifying, but most likely it was actually because he resented her for never granting him his own wish, to be seen. So why should he give her that? But the ending moment of him finally at least trying to let her have what she wanted is probably when he fully comes to terms with the passing of his mother and accepts it. The thing I loved about his process throughout the episode is that it wasn't the usual 5 stages of grief that a person goes through. At least, I don't think it was. BoJack kind of went on from coping with his jokes in the beginning to bargaining with him trying to understand what his mom went with the ICU. After that, going to anger because he's so pissed at his parents never being the people he wanted them to be. And finally, acceptance when he decides to grant his mom her one last wish. This is one of the best episodes of television, period, in my opinion. And I can never watch it without choking up. BoJack Horseman is a very flawed character, and his flaws are all laid out in the open during this one. That's it. I'm done ranting. I love this shit so much. Go watch BoJack Horseman if you haven't. I can't recommend it enough. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe, you guys. And hit that notification bell so you don't miss out. Until next time.